What is going on, guys? Welcome to this video. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the top 5 programming languages to learn in the year 2020 because this is a question that I get so many times. I get it on Instagram and I get it on YouTube. What programming language should I learn for 2020? Which one is better? Python, Java, C++? What is the best language for game development? What is the best language for cybersecurity? What is the best language for machine learning? And so on. In this video, I want to clarify things a little bit and give you my opinion on the best 5 programming languages to learn in the year 2020. So let us get right into it. So let us get right started with place number 5, which is C#, Microsoft's programming language giant. And this language is probably the best choice if you're going into enterprise development and you don't mind being limited or focused on Microsoft infrastructure. So if you just want to get a high paying job and have a lot of good job opportunities in huge corporations and you want to be a software engineer for big business applications, and you don't mind being limited or focused on Microsoft infrastructure, go with C#. Don't watch this video any further. It's the best language that you can choose because it has a high pay. It has much better performance than languages like Java or Python. At the same time, it's safer and more convenient than languages like C or C++. So you could say it's the best of both worlds, but of course it's limited or focused on Microsoft. Now, you could say that there is the .NET Core movement, which goes into the direction of open source or platform independence, but it's not comparable to something like Java. So I don't consider C# or the .NET framework to be really platform independent or open source. It works best when you work with a Windows or Microsoft ecosystem. Now, another point is that C# is one of the best languages that you can choose for game development. So if you want to be a game developer in a huge game development company, or also if you want to develop an indie game, you could go with C# and the Unity engine because this is the Unity engine is, besides the Unreal engine and the, what was it, Cry engine and all these other engines, Unity is one of the most used game development engine that professional companies use to develop AAA titles, but also a lot of indie developer use to make games themselves, like one or two people make an independent game. So if you want to go that route, C# is also a very good choice. Um, and other than that, you also have a framework called Xamarin, which is for cross-platform app development. So if you want to develop apps for iOS and Android and also for Windows Phone at the same time, with one code using C#, you could go and use the Xamarin framework. It's a competitor to Flutter and React Native, if you know them. So this is a very, as you can see, C# has a very wide variety of application fields. And we can go down here to the rating, and you can see I rated it pretty high on speed and efficiency because it outperforms Java, it outperforms Python. It does not outperform C and C++, of course, but it has other um, advantages over these languages. You can see it's very general purpose because you can do almost everything with it. You can actually also use it for machine learning, even though it's not recommended, or at least I would say it's not the best choice for it. But you can develop games, you can develop IoT software, you can develop business applications, you can develop cross-platform mobile apps. So C# can be used for almost everything, which is why I rated it pretty high on general purpose. It also has a pretty decent community, of course, not as large of a community as Python, Java, or JavaScript, because these communities are much larger, much bigger. Um, and one reason for that is, of course, that C# is the proprietary language of Microsoft, which, of course, limits its community. Uh, and simplicity, I rated it, like 60, 70% because it's more simple than languages like C or C++, but less simple than languages like Python or Java or Ruby. So I think this is a pretty fair score here. I rated it mediocre on machine learning, and the only reason for that is that I think that there are better languages. I think Java is better, Python is better, C++ is better for machine learning. But that's just my personal opinion. And on future potential, I think C# is pretty high because let's take a look at the TOB index here. You can see C# ranks on rank number 5, and it has a rising tendency plus 1.23% compared to last year. So I think that C# is a future fit language. And yeah, if you want to use it, these are the pros, these are the cons, and that's it. So in rank number 4, we have C and C++. Now, I usually don't combine these languages because I think that they're quite different. Now, C is procedural, C++ is object-oriented, C has a lot of lovers, C++ has a lot of haters. But at the same time, I wanted to limit myself here to 5 languages because it's a top 5 list. But I also wanted to include both of these languages because I think that they are pretty relevant to learn in the year 2020, even though they're quite old. And the biggest reason for that being that these two languages outperform every other language. And if you're building a system that has to have a very high performance or is limited to very little resources, very little memory, for example, you don't want to use Java and you definitely don't want to use Python. Because in C and C++, you don't have garbage collection, you don't have all these automatic structures, you just do everything on your own. That, of course, makes these languages very complicated and not very, I would not recommend them for beginners because a beginner, maybe he struggles to understand what an integer is, but he's definitely going to struggle with manual memory management. So usually for beginners, I would recommend languages like Java and Python. But if you want to build something with a very high performance, or you have to build something that requires a very high performance, you're not going to pick Python. You're definitely not going to pick Python. So, for example, let's take stock markets. You're in a hedge fund, or you're making investments. You're into high frequency trading. What you're going to do is you're going to build a machine learning model, but you're not going to run it in Python. You're going to prototype it in Python. You're going to write it in Python. You're going to experiment around in Python. You're going to back test it in Python, whatever, but in production, it's going to run in C++ or C. It's not going to run in Python because in trading, everything is about milliseconds. Who trades or who does a transaction 1 millisecond before another guy? And for that purpose, you're never going to use an interpreted language. And you're also not going to use Java because Java has a much lower performance than C or C++. So in this context, you're always going to, sometimes you even going to use the assembly language. But of course, I wouldn't recommend learning the assembly language if you're not deeply into hardware. However, the biggest reason for C++ and C being relevant is because they're super fast and C actually is a quite simple language, not in the way, not saying that it's simple to learn or easy to learn, but it's basically just an abstraction of assembly. So you're deep down in the hardware and you can do whatever you want. C can actually be used for everything, and C++ also. So as you can see here, we have great communities. Another point, lots of job opportunities. The reason for that being that a lot of systems, banking systems and all that, even though they might not need all of this performance that C and C++ offer, these systems are highly complex and already written in C or C++. So if you hire someone to rewrite the whole system in Java or Python, this is way too expensive. You're not going to do that. So what you're going to do is you're going to extend it, you're going to change it, and for that you need C or C++ developers. So let's take a look at the TOE index here as well. You can see C is the most popular programming language after Java. And the difference is 0.01%. As you can see, according to the TOE index, of course. It's not the only index, it's not necessarily the most important index, but you can see that C is even more popular and more relevant than Python according to this index. And the tendency is rising a lot. So C is definitely a language that you want to use. We can take a look at C++ as well. C++ is declining in popularity, which is what I said. There is a high need for C, since C is just an abstraction layer to assembly, and C++, it can be replaced. It's not as efficient as C, but whatever. If you want to use, if you're building stuff that needs high performance, if you're building stuff that needs or is limited to a few resources, you want to go with C or C++. Also, C++ can be used for game development. If you're using the Unreal Engine, for example, you're going to code in C++. And if you're not using C#, you should be using C++ for game development. Don't even try Python or Java for game development. I highly do not recommend this, but yeah. Let's take a look at the rating here. I gave it 100% on speed and efficiency because besides assembly, I think C is the fastest language that you can go for, the high performance language that you can go for. General purpose, I would say yes. Actually, you can build everything in C and C++, but I gave it a lower score since you're not necessarily going to do it. You might say, okay, I can build everything in C, but are you going to build everything in C? I don't think that you're going to code a triple A title in C. I don't think that you're going to make mobile applications in C. Of course, you can do it, but you shouldn't do it, I would say. The community is pretty good. I would say very decent community comparable to C Sharp. It's definitely not a simple language. That is a quite low score here because probably the hardest language to learn is C and C++. So if you're a beginner, I would not recommend learning C or C++ as a first language. For machine learning, I would give it quite a high score because as I said, you're usually doing the prototyping in languages like Python. You're going to use Python and R for most machine learning projects that are not, um, don't need to be high performant in production systems. But actually, libraries like TensorFlow and Keras are written in C++. Python itself is written in C or C++, I think. So actually, whenever you're developing something that really has to run on a high frequency in a high frequency context, you're going to use C or C++ and not Python. And the future potential, I would say it's high, but it's also limited because these languages are already pretty old. They might be replaced, even though I think C will not be replaced that easily, but C++ might be replaced. But yeah, these are the ratings for these two languages on place number 4. Now let us get to place number 3, which is JavaScript. And JavaScript is one of those languages that I personally don't like, but I have to include in this list because this list should be as objective as possible. I'm not telling you which languages I like. I'm telling you which I think are the most important to learn in the year 2020. And I think that JavaScript is one of the best languages to learn in the year 2020 because it has so many application fields and it has a huge community. Now, a couple of decades ago or a couple of years ago, JavaScript was just the front end language of the web. So every browser can understand JavaScript, and you just make websites more alive. You add some animations, you add some functionality, but that's basically it. Nowadays, JavaScript is everywhere. You can build front end with JavaScript, you can build back end with JavaScript, you can build 3D games in your browser with JavaScript. You can build cross-platform apps with JavaScript. So basically, if you know JavaScript, you can do everything nowadays, except for maybe hardware programming or big enterprise software is also usually not written in JavaScript. But it's a general purpose language nowadays. It's not only the web language anymore. At least not only the front end language anymore. You have a lot of awesome frameworks like Angular, you have React, you have React Native, you have Node.js, you have Vue.js. I think that's pronounced correctly. I don't know. So if you're going into freelancing, if you're going into web development, if you just want to be someone who works in the web a lot, I would definitely recommend JavaScript. There's no way around JavaScript if you're going to be a web developer. Now, if you're going to focus on hardware programming, ignore JavaScript. You don't need it. If you're focusing only on machine learning and you don't care about web development at all, don't focus on JavaScript. But actually, everything else, I would say you should know JavaScript. Even if you go into the enterprise realm, you should know a little bit of JavaScript because even if you build a software in Java or C Sharp, you're going to maybe use jQuery for animations or anything like that. So JavaScript is very popular. It has a lot of application fields, a lot of frameworks, and it has a huge community. Let's look at the popularity. You can see JavaScript is at place 7, which is pretty good, and the tendency is, basically remaining the same. It's not dropping a lot, it's not rising a lot. The rating I gave it is a mediocre rating in speed and efficiency. It's very fast client side, but also it's limited to the browser, so you cannot really develop high performance applications with JavaScript. It's pretty high on general purpose, but since you cannot do hardware programming, it's not the best for enterprise software. I gave it not 100%, but like 70%. The community is probably one of the biggest that I know. JavaScript has a huge community because it has so many different application fields. It's pretty simple, but it's also a little bit confusing since this language has some interesting, uh, you know, attributes, I would say. It's good for machine learning because you have still access to libraries like TensorFlow and so on. But if you're really going to machine learning, I would actually recommend other languages. And the future potential, I would say it's like 60, 55%, because it is a language that is important, but it could easily be replaced if a better language comes along, because I don't think that so many systems depend on JavaScript. Now we get to place number 2, which is Java, the silver medal of this list, and it is the enterprise programming language. It's better than C Sharp, I think, because it's platform independent. It is general purpose. It can be used everywhere. It doesn't rely on Microsoft systems. It doesn't rely on Microsoft support, but it's still highly structured. It's just a stable programming language with huge frameworks. And if you want to get a job as an enterprise programming or enterprise software engineer, if you want to develop business applications, I would say that Java is the best choice you can make. Also, if you just don't know at all where you want to go, you don't know where you want to go with programming, you just want to start and see where it takes you, I would say Java is the best language to start. I don't recommend Python for starters because I think Python is too simple. It hides a lot of concepts of programming. I think Python is a great language, but I wouldn't learn it as a first language. I think actually, if you want to learn programming, you don't know what you want to learn exactly, you just want to get into it, start with Java. It's probably the best language to start with, and it's also very general purpose. You can do apps with it. You could also do games with it. I don't recommend it, but Minecraft, for example, is written in Java. At least the early version. I don't know if nowadays it's still written in Java. Maybe Microsoft rewrote it in C Sharp. I don't know. But Microsoft was originally written in Java. Other games are also written in Java, but usually you want to pick C, C++, or C Sharp for game development. But Java is still also the native language for Android systems. So if you want to go ahead and develop Android applications and you don't want to use cross-platform app development languages or frameworks like Flutter or React Native, you should go with Java because that's the native language. And I'm not a big fan of Kotlin. I think Kotlin is basically just a bad copy of Java in my opinion. But Java is general purpose. It's the best for getting a job as a professional programmer. And if you know Java very well, you cannot do anything wrong. And as you can see on this list here, Java is the highest ranking language. It's the most popular language, very close to C, but still number 1 right now. And it's also efficient. It outperforms Python, but it does not outperform C, C++, which is why I gave it a pretty low score, comparably pretty low score on speed and efficiency. It's general purpose, but it has some limitations. I would not use it for hardware programming, not for game development. But you can use it for data science since it has, or big data since it has Hadoop, for example. You can use Hadoop in Java. It also has a very, very large community since it's professional, it's enterprise, but it's still open, not open source, but still platform independent. That's what I wanted to say. Everyone can use Java. It's free. It doesn't rely on corporate or commercial systems like Microsoft's ecosystem. It's a very simple language to learn. It's best for beginners, I think. It can still be used for machine learning and data science, and it has a future potential since a lot of companies, most of the companies right now are using Java for their applications. And in the future, they will need someone to extend or maintain these systems. So Java is definitely a great choice no matter what. Now let us get to number 1, the gold medal, which is Python. And I think this was obvious since Neural 9 is all about Python, machine learning, and so on. But the fact is, if you're getting into machine learning, if you're getting into data science, if you're getting into computer vision, you want to go with Python. Of course, as I said, if you need high performance in your production system, you're going to implement everything in C++, for example, or C or Java at least. You're not going to use Python, but if you're not that dependent on limited resources or on high performance, you are going to use Python for machine learning project. This is the one player. However, let me mention, because I get this question a lot on social media, Python is not the best programming language to learn. Because there is nothing such like the best programming language. A lot of people ask me, what is the best programming language to learn? And my response is always, what for? You cannot just say what is the best programming language. This is a stupid question. You want to know, what are you using this programming language for? If you're going into game development, I would say C++ or C# is the best language. If you're going into enterprise development for Microsoft systems, C# is the best language. If you're going into rapid prototyping of machine learning models or into data science, into all these things, Python is the best language. But you should never know only Python, because there are a lot of script kiddies that consider themselves Python experts, but they don't know about any other programming language. They don't know C Sharp, they don't know C++, they don't know Java, they don't know C, they just know Python and maybe a little bit of JavaScript. But a good programmer should have a high understanding of what's happening behind the scenes, not just know the limited understanding of the high level Python where you just say a equals 10 and everything happens by itself, where you just make an instance of some classifier and you don't even know what's happening. So if you want to get into machine learning and data science really deep into the subject, I would recommend learning Python and C++ to have a full package, to know what's happening on a very low level, but to also have the capability to implement it rapidly on a high level. With Python, you can do web apps as well. So, for example, companies like Pinterest use Django for their social media networks. So, Python can definitely be used with Django or Flask for professional web applications, and the job opportunities for Python are very, very uh, big. And I would definitely say that Python is one of the most future fit languages. So let's get to the ratings here. I rated it pretty low on speed and efficiency since it's a very slow, high level interpreted language. It's a general purpose language, but still limited because I wouldn't recommend it for hardware programming, wouldn't recommend it for game development, also for app development. It's not really a good choice right now. The community is one of the best I've ever seen. It's comparable to the one of JavaScript. You can find a solution to every problem. It's huge, it's big. Everyone loves Python, and so a lot of people are programming it in it, and there is a solution to every problem that you can have. It's probably the simplest language that I know. I didn't give it a full score here. I don't know why. It's a time ago that I written this blog post, but I think maybe because you can find a language that's a little bit more simpler than Python. For example, I don't know, Scratch, if you consider it a programming language. I don't, but you can find simpler ways of learning programming, but Python is probably the most simple language of the ones that are considered the main programming languages. It's the best programming language for machine learning, but again, you should combine it with C++ if you're running on high performance system or you have limited resources. And it has a huge future potential. Let's look at the TOE index here. It's on rank number 3, but it's rising in popularity, so it's definitely going to be in the top 3 here. I think on GitHub or Stack Overflow, it's even in the top 3 as well. I don't know, to be honest, but it's definitely a language that is very important for the future. It's the language to learn if you're going to machine learning and data science, and it's all in all a good choice of a programming language. So that was my top 5 list of the best programming languages to learn in the year 2020. I hope it clarified some things for you and I hope it brought some value to you. If that was the case, let me know by hitting the like button and leaving a comment in the comment section down below. Also, feel free to ask questions and give feedback in the comment section down below. And if you haven't done it yet, subscribe to this channel to see more future videos for free. Other than that, thanks for watching and see you in the next video. Bye.